Okay. Hello and welcome to this first session of what we're calling the Wisdom of Cycles, which is I'm Mary Kennedy. And do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Katrina Brady.
Great. So Katrina and I have been talking about coming together to bring the Celtic wheel, which is the body of work that I've developed, which is all really about coming back into the wisdom of cycles and astrology together. And we really started to get curious about what would happen if we had those, both of those cycles come together, and see if we could deepen our inquiry around and deepen what I think the wisdom that we can bring from that. So to introduce myself, I'm a wisdom, somebody who I really hold at the center of all my work is, how can we live more wisely? And I'm working with both ancient and new or contemporary science wisdom that we get from both the past and our ancestors, and the more contemporary thinking and the more contemporary science and psychology. That's what's really at the core of my work. And I run what's called the Celtic Wheel, an online course for women. It runs the whole duration of a year with the Celtic Wheel. I'm also a facilitator and a coach and a teacher. So yeah, I'm delighted to be here and thrilled to have who I consider an amazing woman in her own journey, Katrina Brady. So Katrina, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here for sure. I am an astrologer and I work within the healing arts as well. And I work a lot with the moon cycles. So, and I find cyclical wisdom to be so important, which is sort of a major ethos of my work. Because I find astrology not only to be, a tool for sort of self-development and empowerment, but, I think that it really sort of builds your awareness of the power of cycles. And especially as, we are sort of tapping into the power of the feminine expression, part of this awakening and remembrance is through the observance of cycles sort of outside of ourselves and also within ourselves as well, which, for me is really manifested through my work with the moon specifically. And I find it to be such a powerful tool for sort of self-healing as well. So, and that would be sort of one of the main ethos of my work would be cyclical wisdom as well. So it really sort of interesting and being able to share this and within the context and how it relates to the Celtic wheel as well. So
yeah, and you also have you're studying the Celtic tradition. You have
yes, yeah. I just started delving more into that as well, which has been, there's just so much overlap, because I think for me too, astrology isn't just, it's not just a practice, but it's a spiritual practice that's based on embodiment as well. And so in my own sort of my own learning so far, really see how the Celtic philosophy really overlaps with my own astrological philosophy as well. So it's really beautiful to see how they sort of dance together, and how that astrological philosophy, it seems to have been sort of almost like a centerpiece of the sort of ancient philosophy that's here, as we can see reflected through sort of the ancient sites, within Ireland as well, how they sort of have astronomical connotations and meanings as well. So yeah.
Yeah, we're coming from Ireland. What I love is that you're based here in Ireland, I'm here in Ireland, and we are really, we're on the land, on this Celtic land. So I think that's really important. And the other point I think that's important is that we started talking before, of course, we had this incredible and unprecedented crisis, global crisis of the COVID-19. So it was interesting. We had started talking about doing this, and now, of course, we want to bring this to we really want to make this relevant to how can we bring this wisdom and the wisdom of cycles in order to help us make meaning of this. And I think once we start to make meaning of something, I certainly get oriented when I find that I have some kind of meaning in it, and also what resources can we use? What can resource us from these cycles? Because I think we all need whatever resources that we can to really come through this, navigate it, and flourish. I truly believe we're in a time of great evolution, and I think certainly you'll speak to that, Katrina.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me in my own practice, or even working with clients, like I suppose the most healing aspect of astrology is that everything has meaning and has purpose, so, and it really sort of just provides a lens for interpreting and understanding the deeper meaning when these more difficult experiences happen as well. And I think that, somebody who, when we practice, engaging with cycles and the wisdom that it offers, really comes to life in moments like this, where it's like, okay, this is the medicine, this is what I've been learning, this is what I've been doing, like how can I apply it to sort of help transition, not only for myself, but for the people around me. How can I sort of translate and offer this medicine to my community as well, which I think is really important during this crisis specifically as well. So it's interesting that we have the opportunity to sort of really engage with this process through the spring equinox on Friday as well. So
yeah, it's great, and it's a great time to work with, as we'll be working with polarity, which is a lot of the theme of this time. So I suppose let's dive in, really. I mean, we're going to be offering these at every festival in the Celtic tradition, or in the Celtic wheel. So there are 8 festivals in the year. This spring equinox is actually the 4th festival in the yes, it's the 4th festival in the cycle. So we started at Samhain in the darkness in October, and this is in the Northern Hemisphere, of course. Started in October, at the end of October, moving into the darkness. Winter solstice was the 2nd festival, and then into Imbolc, which was the beginning of spring. So now we find ourselves at spring equinox, which is the mid-spring point, the point of mid-spring in the cycle. And we have been in the feminine half of the year, in the Gamos half of the year. We'll still be there until Bealtaine, which is the next festival. But we've been in the deep feminine, moving a little bit out of that, and now the masculine is strengthening very much. And at this point in the cycle, where equal night, equal day happens twice a year, the spring equinox and the autumn equinox, that's a point where at the spring equinox, the feminine is handing over to the masculine, which will become more dominant in the cycle from now until the autumn equinox. And I think we'll speak a little bit about that. Definitely one of the themes of this time. So it's celebrated, just to give an overview, there isn't direct evidence that the Celtic people themselves celebrated the spring equinox, but the pre-Celts definitely appear to on this land in Ireland, because there are 2 tombs, one Lough Crew, which is Slieve na Cailleach, which is the hill of the witch, or the hill of the Cailleach, and that's aligned with the sunrise on the spring equinox. And equally Nouth, which is a massive 100-foot passage grave, which again is aligned to the sunrise, and it's a wonderful tomb. Again, these are all up around Meath, and well, I think, Katrina, you said you're close to Lough Crew where you are right now. Yeah, it's just down the road.
Yeah, in Cavan, so not too far.
Yeah. So it was definitely, it's felt that the pre-Celts, who were the megalithic builders, the builders of those big megalithic tombs, they were more the Neolithic period, 5,000 years ago, that they were more stargazers. So, and they would have been seen as honoring more of the solstices and equinoxes in the the wheel. So let me just quickly pull up the wheel here to get a sense, an image of where we are. So let's see if I can, just bear with me. Swing it around a little. It's not swinging. Yes, there we are. Whoa. Yes. Bring it back here. So here we are at the spring equinox. Actually, I prefer to look at it this way. So Samhain was the start of the wheel, and it starts in the darkness, just like all the Celtic festivals. They honor the darkness, and this is why it's a great time to look towards the Celtic tradition for some wisdom at this time, which is I feel we're very much in a Samhain, between Samhain and winter solstice time on the planet. So that's the first festival. The second festival is the winter solstice, the dark night of the soul. Then we move into Imbolc, which is the beginning of spring. Bridget, celebrate Bridget here, Bridget the Maiden, and now we're in spring equinox. So this is where we find ourselves. This is from Samhain to Bealtaine is the Gamos half of the year, which is the dark half. The feminine principle is dominant. And then from Bealtaine to Samhain, it's the Samos, summer, light time of the year. But really, it's at this point here that we have the crossover. So it's spring equinox, the feminine gives way to the masculine. The feminine being the nourishing, nurturing, slow. We learn in the wheel how to be slow, how to surrender, how to let go and shed, all those things that are very feminine, to receive deep receptivity, dream time, we're dreaming, and then we're now starting to take more action as the masculine comes in. And again, as we go through the summer, the masculine principle is dominant, more agency, action, taking risk, moving out into the world, until the autumn equinox, when the feminine again just becomes more dominant as we move back into that feminine part of the year. So I think that's all I need to say about that with it. I suppose one other thing, the themes of this time of the year that I work with, 3 themes. The theme of fertility and growth, which we can see everywhere in nature. So the wheel was basically a reflection of nature. It was how the Celtic people, they organized themselves very much in tune with nature. So what's happening now is that growth and fertility, we've the first flowers of the daffodils, we've plowing and seeds, blessing of the land, ready to really receive the growth and the fertility and the growth of this time of year. Sun is getting stronger in the sky, warmer, stronger. You wouldn't really know right now in Ireland, but that's what's happening. It's growing in the sky. So we're moving towards budding and more in towards that. Just towards the expansion that will come at Bealtaine. So the second theme that we work with is the theme of the dance of the opposites, which I think is so pertinent right now and where we find ourselves on the planet. So the really important learning how to work with opposites and really include both opposites, because when in the Celtic tradition you include opposites and you really honor both opposites, then something new emerges, a third thing. And the sacred number 3 is very important motif in the Celtic tradition, and this to me is the basis of evolution. So when we honor the duality of life and we allow both sides of a polarity, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, then a third thing emerges, which is something new is born from that. And then the third theme that we work with at the spring equinox is the strengthening masculine. Again, it's connected to the other 2 themes, but again, it's that strengthening masculine. We're moving into that. We can see it in the sun, we can see it in the growth of the around us, and how important it is to be able to move into that. And the way I work with that masculine is we're working with commitment and discernment, because we're really coming out of the feminine, and we're working with, where do I need to move? What action do I need to start to consider? How can I commit to what in between winter solstice and Imbolc, we had a lot of dream time. We were visioning and dropping into our dreams and listening and receiving the dreams and of our souls. And so now it's time to commit to those, to really take on that more masculine warriorship within you. And this is because we have both masculine and feminine within us. And so we've been really practicing the feminine practices, and now we're moving to step into the masculine, really stepping out into the world. So that's my piece on that. Do you want to, I'm just going to hand over to you, Katrina. Have you any comments or any questions? Or
yeah, like, I think for me, sort of, talking to you more about this process, I just really think it's so beautiful, especially with Imbolc, that sort of perspective that it's the beginning of spring. And I think that, like, using this sort of, using the Celtic wheel in a way is such a beautiful way to sort of reattune yourself to nature's processes as well. Because, like for me, I was like, oh, I grew up thinking spring was at the beginning of, or sorry, at the end of March. But then, sort of tapping into it, or, being in the land more in the country, you're like, actually, this is a long process that goes on. And, it's just been really beautiful talking about these different processes within it. And something like Imbolc, you can feel the land stirring, and start to wake up in a sense, and it's not like any life isn't sort of blossoming as it is now. When you walk the lounge, you see all the flowers start to peep out and everything like that. But we can learn so much. And to me, that's the beauty of the Celtic wheel, is it really helps you sort of awaken to this process that is happening, to reattune ourselves really to nature, which is so needed in today's modern world as well. And as you said, particularly around times, where we might find ourselves within, the darker, within a darker process as well, that, that we too shall emerge, from that as well. So
yeah, and I think that's important. The attunement to nature has been massive. That's my teacher, Dolores Whelan, really embodied that and taught me that. And I think that subtlety, because we start to really feel the subtlety in our bodies of spring is actually arising. It's like a deeper trust in a cycle, and the outward appearance doesn't look like it's spring, but we know we can attune to something deeper, that we know and trust that this cycle, that the wheel is turning. I think that's lovely. Yeah, really lovely.
And I think too, with those like Imbolc and Samhain and Bealtaine, they're such beautiful in-between states where it sort of reminds us that, when we talk about process, we're still live in a sort of patriarchal society where it's focus on end result as well. So we think about even something spiritual within the context of like making magic or manifestation, we're still focused on the end result, but we sort of ignore sort of the process, where it's, from that perspective, that true magic lies within the process, and the end result is one thing, but the nurturing of that inner process is where the magic really happens, in those quiet moments, in the work that you put in a sense, as well. And we just sort of charge through and, just think about like what we want to create with these sort of spiritual practices as well. We lose those beautiful magical moments,
And I'm really aware of, it was Dolores that pointed this out first. Right now we're in a Samhain time on the planet. We're in death and destruction and disorientation and not knowing. And often what our current culture does, wants to go straight to Imbolc, straight to spring, get out of this, I don't want to be here. And it creates a square rather than a circle, which is very goal oriented. And a lot of what I'm really feeling right now is the need to really drop back and listen, what is this crisis telling us? Yes, there absolutely have to be people at the front line, taking action and and coordinating. But a lot of us, I feel, need to drop back more and feel this winter solstice, which is the dark night of the soul. It's like, who am I? Where is everything that I knew once that was so secure? Where it's gone? Who am I now? And there's such deep wisdom in this place, in this, and then we can it starts to really emerge out of that. Yeah. So do you want to start to just give us a little bit about what's happening in the planets right now, or
Yeah,
what
sure.
is relevant to this?
Yeah, of course.
I'll stop sharing.
Okay.
Bring you back. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I might just share my own screen. That's not what I want to share. Okay, so this is the chart for the equinox that is on Friday at like 3:50 a.m. on March 20th. So just talking about some of the astrology of what's going on at the moment, which is, of course, really powerful, looking at, what are some of the teachings, from the astrological wheel as well, in terms of the equinox. The spring equinox is in the sign of cardinal fire. So cardinal fire, so since the beginning of this year, we have been in, again, feminine energies. All of the astrological signs, they have feminine qualities to them. And with cardinal fire, it's the first time in the January to December year where we are experiencing masculine energy. But I think within that as well, it's important to remember that it's the sort of masculine energy that's emerging from the feminine. So it's really sort of keeping one foot grounded within sort of what we've been feeling into in terms of, as you have been saying, Mari, about the dream state as well, as we start to, as we go to bridge into, what do I want to create, and with cardinal fire energy as well, there's certainly qualities around that about, inspired action, and I think that idea of inspired action, within the context of the astrological wheel, it's important to look at, well, what has been going on, what's been my internal process I've been moving through, over the past several months, and from that perspective, being immersed within the feminine, what am I feeling called, to do? What am I feeling called to take action upon as well? And if we look at, this specific, spring equinox, it's important to look at, it from an astrological perspective, which can sort of help build context as to what's going on in the world. And quite interestingly, it's making a very strong connection to Saturn, which I thought was, it might be interesting to sort of talk about, especially with what's manifesting in the world at the moment. So Saturn is just about to move into a new sign. She's just about to move into the sign of Aquarius. So, it's interesting that the spring equinox taps into Saturn at basically the last moment when she's still in Capricorn. So Saturn has been in the sign of Capricorn for the past 2 years, and Saturn in Capricorn, I always think of it as almost remembering sort of the archetype of the mother, in a sense. Because, in our school of astrology, the Blue Rose, we would teach Saturn as being, which has been our own experience of this energy, is it's a feminine energy. And, it's a feminine energy from the perspective of, if you think about, when you're a child, who supports you, who teaches you those sort of lessons about the world and life in a really sort of enriched manner. And, it's different for everybody, but, those are some of the more matriarchal things, that we sort of feel into when we're tapping into Saturn's energy. And the fact that in the sign of Capricorn, Capricorn is a cardinal earth energy, which is all about what am I birthing into this world? What is the state of my own reality? Is my reality, or the structures within my reality, are they supporting me, in a way that I can hold myself, that I feel nurtured, that I feel safe, or, do I feel sort of restricted? Do I feel limited by my current reality? So these are all sort of themes that we would be moving through over the past 2 years as Saturn went into Capricorn in December 2017. And at the beginning of this year, Pluto has moved to conjunct Saturn, which is really interesting. So we're coming to the end of this sort of collective remembrance of the matriarchy in a way, with the conjunction of Pluto, which is really sort of, you've heard a lot of astrologers talk about sort of the death of the patriarchy as we know it, to come back into the rebalancing between the feminine and the masculine expression as being reflected through the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, so it's interesting that, this is sort of happening, and maybe we're seeing, in the sort of crisis that we're in, that it's not only sort of crisis of a health crisis, but it's also an economic crisis. And what does vulnerability mean today? Do our systems, are they going to support us through this crisis, or are they not giving support? What does vulnerability mean? Does it mean, what does survival mean? All these kinds of things, which is, in today's world, we have to survive in an economic way as well. And, is that really how we want to be surviving? What does that all mean to us today? So, which is all part of this sort of dismantling and restructuring of power, as we sort of seek to, on a collective level, sort of restructure it with these sort of matriarchal values within it as well, which are, how can we sort of rebalance, the structures, the systems within our life, to also have them be grounded within feminine values as well, of compassion and support too. So
Can I speak to that, just because I think that's so relevant with the dance of polarity at this time in the Celtic wheel that we really honor and celebrate and explore, because where we have been living is in one side of the polarity, that over masculine, and this isn't men anti-men, or it's beyond gender. It's the masculine mode is the mode of productivity and achievement and agency and out there and getting things done. And we've been hanging out in that, where we've become overscheduled and over functioning and always on, and bigger, brighter, better, exponential growth. That's where we've hung out. Our system has hung out, and we are part of the system. And what I'm hearing you say is that in this Saturn piece, it's like it's the invitation to pick up the other side of the pole, the more nurturing, more like we learn in the wheel, that mode of the feminine, which is deeply intuitive and honors the intuitive, as well as if we have both poles, we honor productivity, we want to produce, we want to achieve, but underneath it, or very deeply connected to it, is that the mode of rest and nurturing and slow, and honoring that part of the feminine as well. And I think, talking about kind of anti-fragile, that's when we become anti-fragile, when we can really move fluidly between each side of the pole, knowing at times we need to pick up the masculine and be in the world and be kick-ass and out there and competent, and then other times when we really need to be in our softness and our intuitive and listening. So that's, I just wanted to chime in on that.
Yeah, because really what this energy is sort of facilitating for us is to really look deeply into our own conditioning, how we are sort of experiencing those different polarities within ourselves, and sort of honoring both expressions of, sometimes I have to experience the fear, and allowing that to come in, push through it in a sense, hold space for it, And, you know, sometimes part of that process is unearthing even new fears or a different conditioning that we weren't even aware of as well. And I think that, you know, this process that this equinox is sort of tapping into is sort of really important, you know, especially if we are sort of moving into sort of a new era, because it's really sort of having us look at, well, if our reality as we know it today is being dismantled and restructured, what do we want to create within that space? If we're sort of witnessing sort of a death phase, you know, what do we want? You know, what do we want the rebirth to look like? You know, what values do we want it to have? And I think part of that process is doing the work on ourselves, looking at, you know, what changes we've made within our own realities, what fears we pushed through, you know, within our own realities over the past couple of years, and look at, well, how within this new world that we're creating, what do we want that to look like really as well? So so it's a really sort of beautiful energy and to push through as well, especially with Saturn and Capricorn. You know, if we look at it from a historical context, it certainly goes back to, you know, it certainly goes back to, you know, the last time this happened was in 1518, where, you know, there is, you know, the Reformation happened, you know, and without getting into it too much, you know, the suppression of the feminine within religious structures, you know, which was a big outcome of that as well. The suppression of the feminine. And I feel like at the moment, there's so much of that suffering that is being sort of ancestrally cleared as well, you know, and really having to look at what is this energy that is suppressed? What are the abuses of power that are currently manifesting in our lives, you know, and sort of feeling into this is something that is not just, you know, part of our current reality, but it's part of the reality that we've been experiencing for generations. So there's a lot of space to be held over that, as we sort of really are made aware of the level of, you know, loss and suffering that's going on in the world today as well, and to really move into this new energy as well. And I find it just so beautiful that the spring equinox is sort of tapping into that as well, because it's sort of tapping back into sort of, well, okay, like this is all going in, this is all going on around me, but, you know, from that perspective of cardinal fire, which is like, you know, I'm a light bearer, you know, I have the light within me. How can I share this with other people? So how can I share this wisdom that I've been cultivating, this magic within myself I've been cultivating over the past few months, as, you know, we have been in the feminine. How am I going to transition this? You know, what action am I feeling the call to take, you know, within my relationships, within my community, you know, which I think to me, especially in this time of crisis, which is really, you know, where the magic of cyclical wisdom comes in, especially if we're talking about sort of really on a collective level healing, you know, the feminine expression that has been suppressed. You know, I find working with cycles, you know, for me, really strongly with the moon cycles, is that working within that wheel, whether it's the Celtic wheel or astrological wheel, because they're extremely interconnected, but you know, it's sort of it's a tool for us to awaken to the suppressed feminine within us, and not even so much awaken, but remember that which has been suppressed within us. So remember, you know, what is the feminine? What is stillness? What is that invitation for reflection? Because that is, we've been taught for that state to be uncomfortable. So it's really sort of a tool for us to go into what is our conditioning. Do I feel uncomfortable within the stillness? You know, what is the wisdom to be sort of learned from these moments of stillness, so that, you know, when I feel that call to action, it's coming from that place of inner wisdom and magic as well, which I think is really sort of a beautiful sentiment to carry into as you know, through this spring equinox, which is sort of that portal into the building of this, you know, masculine energy.
I think that's so important, because I even found myself, you know, when everything happened really a week ago, and the Taoiseach, or Prime Minister of this country, you know, kind of started the lockdown. I found in me, you know, that I went into my old masculine to just kind of, how can I help? How can I be of service? And I had to really stop myself, and constantly I feel it in my system that underneath that masculine movement must be the feminine. You know, I must come from that feminine place of dropping back and listening and seeing what is the wisdom, what is it that where does my action has to come from that place. And I think, you know, I think that's one of the things of where do we suppress our own feminine is so important, you
Mm-hmm.
know, in order, because we go into this panic survival mode, we go into that overdoing and overdrive, and yeah, just almost wanting to save the world in a way, and save, you know, I mean, that's certainly something I experience within my own system. Yeah, so I think that's massive at this spring equinox.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too that sort of knee-jerk reaction to go in the masculine, like there can be such beautiful intentions for that as well, you know, as you were saying, that idea of like needing to save the world, you know, in a sense. But you know, I think too, it's like, you know, we want to help others, you have to help yourself first as well. And I think that that is sort of, especially with this, is sort of important to sort of look at, because it's very easy to get overwhelmed or even ignore one's own process by focusing on other people's process.
And I think that's very much, you know, I think the feminine part of the beauty of the feminine is her capacity within us, whether we're male or female, the capacity to, you know, have that very dispersed attention, and we can attend to a lot of things. But we have to, I really think we're really learning how to regulate ourselves first, come back to ourselves, regulate. I do a lot of self-compassion work, which is deep feminine, and then I'm regulated, so then I can co-regulate with somebody, with my people around me, with my family, with my community, and that feels really important work. Yeah, really important. So I love that you've brought that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should we just maybe sum it up? Have you more to say on that, or?
No, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah. I'm just like, I love to kind of sum it up and see like what are the takeaways that people could have from this that might in some way, you know, how can we apply this at this time, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that from you know, looking at the astrology and everything that's going on at the moment, you know, especially, you know, before Saturn moves into a new sign, you know, it's really important to look at, you know, how am I sort of dropping into this process that's happening at the moment? You know, what are the changes that have happened in my life, you know, over the past 2 years, you know, in a sense, how have I really sort of tapped into my own feminine expression, you know, within myself? How have I nurtured that? How have I remembered the wisdom within myself? You know, do I consider myself to have wisdom as well, which I think is another thing in today's world as well, especially within like the astrological arts, which is something that is, you know, really central to my work, is that using the wisdom of cycles is to sort of listen to your own voice as well. So it's like you can look at interpretations and stuff like that, which is fine, but it's about sort of finding your own process, the wisdom of your own experiences as well. So I think that right now is really an invitation to look at what have been my own experiences, what has been my own process within the past 2 years in relation to how I've been co-creating my own reality. But also within from Samhain as well, which would have been the beginning of the cycle, as you have said. So I think that's really important, and to sort of just hold space for what has been let go of, you know, because I think too that sort of what has been let go of our life, when we go through this cleansing of things sort of are released from our life, you know, it's sort of creating space, fertile soil for new things to come in as well. So I think it's an important time to sort of hold space for looking at those own processes that we've individually been moving through as well. And especially, sorry.
What have you let go of in your life in the last, how long would you say? Is it in the last 2 years since
But
Saturn?
you can look at it within the context of the past 2 years since Saturn has moved into Capricorn, which would have been at the end of 2017, basically as well. So I think that is really important, and especially, you know, what's been going on at the moment, you know, and, you know, we are emerging from that state of the feminine as well, is to look at, well, what is my own reaction, you know, what fears have I been moving through? What has been, you know, we talk you know, when we say conditioning, it's like, well, what are the beliefs that I have? What is my own sort of, you know, for myself, you know, been looking at all of this is sort of happening. And then I was like, well, what's going to happen to my business, or what's going to happen to my living situation, you know? And, you know, just watch those things that have sort of been processing within ourselves of, well, what has within our mind, you know, which we have to exist within this patriarchal society, what has been coming up to the surface, you know? And it's like when we watch those reactions within ourselves, you know, I think it almost helps us sort of look at them objectively, in a sense, and be like, okay, that was my reaction. And, you know, do I give power to that, in a sense? So it's like, okay, you know, this is sort of part of this survivalist mentality that I have. Is that actually grounded in sort of real, sort of what matters to me at the moment, in spite of everything? So it's like, okay, well, I don't really need to worry about those things, because that'll, you know, that'll be fine, you know, in a sense. So it's almost like watching our own process really acutely, I think, is really important too, because of the importance of polarities that you were talking about as well. So if I could summarize it, I would say, you know, definitely looking at the changes and honoring the changes that we've been making within our lives over the past 2 years, really, and how the wisdom from our own experiences can be applied to this collective changing of reality that we're moving through at the moment, and to also sort of bear witness to our own reactions to things, because there can be so much wisdom and so much learning to our own knee-jerk reactions in times like this, in relation to some of the conditioning that might be sort of, you know, needing to let go of as we sort of move into a new era that is sort of based and balanced within the feminine and masculine expression as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, to add to that, I would definitely concur with you. Like, own your wisdom. A lot of us have been through a lot of stuff in the last 2 years, last 10 years, but certainly last 2 years. Own your wisdom, and drop into really notice if you are suppressing the feminine and moving into that panic of doing, and because when we have a lot of anxiety in our body, it's very uncomfortable to actually stay, which is what the feminine asks us to stay, and really embody and really meet the discomfort and meet the fear. And I'll just quickly share this. Maybe that will. This is like how we work with the polarities. So often we've been thrown into this side of fear, in what's happened, and uncertainty. And what I would say is, honor that. Can we really sit with our fears? You know, see where they are, what's happening in our bodies, where are they showing up, where's the anxiety and fear. The other states that are showing up are anger and grief too. So honor those states as part of you, because we often want to push those away, because we all want to be safe and secure. But then find a way of also regulating, because the more you honor the fear on this side, or the anxiety or the sadness, then it will move you towards a feeling of safety and security. So be with your fears, but also be with the hopes and dreams, be with gratitude, look around you, and be, you know, so take up the opposites. That's really important. Keep the feminine, even though she's handing over to the masculine, keep it fluid, keep it moving. It's like the inhale and the exhale. So that's really important, I think, takeaway. And this is real spring equinox time, when we're really working with it's not finding balance. We're not trying to come in here and stay here at the center. We're staying fluid. So we identify more with actually what is, we can encompass both. We're big on this. We supersede the polarity. Yeah. So, and then the last thing is know that we as a humanity are moving from taking up this, just inhabiting this one side of the polarity that was so over masculine, and we are moving, and it's uncomfortable, but if each one of us can start to honor the feminine and move from that place, know that it's we want to integrate masculine and feminine at this point.
Yeah. And I think that energy, the spring equinox, that sort of idea that we all have a meaningful contribution to make here, however big or small, that is right for us. That idea of taking that light, that inspiration within us and being like, well, what can I do about this today, can really sort of anchor our sense of purpose, within all of this as well, because we're going to rebuild together, as well. So,
and we were born for these times. We were made for this, as Joan of Arc said.
Yeah.
Great cry. I was made for this. So let's take great faith and let's drop into these wisdom of cycles and the cyclical wisdom, as you call it, Katrina. It's certainly helping to steady me at this time, and and then you'll see us. We'll be back together again for Bealtaine at the beginning of May, and let's see where we've got to at that point.
Exactly.
So, thanks everyone.
Yeah.
Here for this inaugural. Oh yeah, Katrina, do you want to just say when is the actual equinox astrologically? Do you have the time and date of that? March the 20th. Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent. It's on May 20th. So sometimes the astrological dates don't coincide with the dates, but for this one, it is on March 20th at 3:50 a.m.
3:50 a.m. Okay, and people celebrate it usually go to Lough Crew here in Ireland, and now, but I'm not sure what'll be happening with all the social distance.
Yes, yeah.
It's a beautiful time to create a ritual around the opposites and the feminine and masculine. Yes, and the fertility and growth. Okay, see you at Bealtaine.
Yes, thank you.
All right.